Lauren Self, welcome back to The Deep End.
Thanks for having me again, Marshall.
Yeah, it's really great to chat with you. This is part of our broader series on housing, access, how different startups are approaching an issue, which I think many people in the millennial and Gen Z cohorts will feel, which is just that housing seems to be out of reach, that very stereotypical, but frankly deep part of the American dream. And I'd love to hear how you as a founder and Roots broadly as a company is actually approaching this issue through your own specific context. So let's just start there. Could you introduce yourself and of course Roots and the context of how you're building the company?
Yeah, so I'm Lauren. I'm a co-founder at Roots. Roots is a company that creates accessibility to homeownership by making homeownership flexible.
Yeah, and I think the great question to ask you is, what does accessibility mean for you when it comes to the homeownership question?
So today, for the most part, homeownership works like this. You find the home that you want, you secure a mortgage, you make this large down payment, and then you move into your home. And each month when you pay your mortgage, you are effectively buying more of your home back from the bank, right? The bank owns the home and you buy more of it back from them every month. So because of the agent fees and other closing costs that come into play when you eventually sell your house, you need your house to appreciate a good bit before you can sell it without taking a loss. And historically, that has meant that homeowners need to keep their home for 5 to 10 years before they can sell it without taking a loss. That means that, home ownership today is not flexible. And for a lot of people, that means that it is also not accessible, because if you need flexibility, and if home ownership does not offer that, then it's not a good fit for you and you are locked out. So with Roots, similar to traditional home ownership, each month you buy a bit more of your home. But because you don't have any debt, you don't have that long-term commitment that traditional home ownership demands. So you can live in your home for just a year or longer, any period of time really. And then when you decide that you want to move elsewhere, you can move out and you can retain that equity that you've accrued.
Can you explain how that works? So let's say I get a Roots home, I spend 2 years, and I want to try somewhere else. If I own equity in a house that I'm moving on from, just help us understand that maybe through a case study example.
Yeah, so let's say that you move into a Roots home tomorrow, right? You live there, you have this wonderful experience of enjoying your home and really feeling like you own a part of it because you do. And then maybe you decide to move out in a couple of years. You move into a next home. Maybe that next home is a Roots home as well, where you continue to build equity every month. What that could mean for you, repeat this process over a 5 to 10 year horizon, that could mean that you've lived in 2, 3, 4 different Roots homes, and you own a bit of each of them. So today, traditional homeownership demands that you own a part of the house that you live in, and when you leave that house, you no longer own any of it. What Roots enables is the ability for you to own a part of every home that you've ever lived in. Kind of like having a mortgage that could be applied to different homes, but without that debt. So you get to own a little bit of every home that you've ever lived in.
And something you all have written a lot about is the idea that this is different than a model that people describe as rent to own. Can you explain what that system looks like and how that's different than what you're actually doing here at Roots?
Yeah, so rent to own is an on-ramp to home ownership. Rent to own companies, what they'll typically do is they will purchase the home that you want for you. Each month, a part of what you pay will go into a savings account that can be eventually converted into a down payment for you to buy the whole home from that company. So being that it's an on-ramp, it actually makes the duration that you need to stay in your home even longer than traditional home ownership. Because, for the on-ramps, the goal of the on-ramp is to access traditional home ownership. We know that traditional home ownership demands a 5 to 10 year commitment. So in addition to that 5 to 10 year commitment, you now have to move through the on-ramp period, which can take 2, 3, I think up to 5 years with some companies. So now you're looking at a minimum duration in your home of 7, 8 years, all the way up to 12 before you can see a return and be able to move out while not taking a loss on that home that you've lived in. Roots is very different in that we are not an on-ramp to home ownership. We allow you to own a part of your home from the very beginning, from the time that you first move in.
How does Roots decide which houses to purchase in the first place that folks could take fractional ownership out of?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we have a buy box that we operate within. It will look different in different markets. Today we operate in Las Vegas. And so the buy box here in Las Vegas is really the middle of the market. It is the segment of the market that has the most liquidity, really, kind of the houses that are in the highest demand. And the reason for that is that is this segment of housing that young professionals and families primarily want to live in, and that is who we serve.
You're looking at that middle of the market, like high liquidity homes. Who do you think is like the prime customer who's looking for this sort of opportunity?
Roots serves customers that are looking for flexible home ownership. That is both individuals who are renters and individuals who are homeowners and want to move into a next home and don't want that long-term commitment. We actually had a customer move into a home recently that moved out of a home that he already owned and into a Roots home. So it's not just for renters, right? Our customers view Roots as the better way to own, full stop. That is primarily young professionals and families. Many of the individuals that we serve are high income earners who actually could go out and buy the house the traditional way, but they don't want to have that long-term commitment. And so they come to Roots instead so they can own flexibly.
So I know you all are in the Las Vegas market. Why is Las Vegas kind of the epicenter for these different markets and dynamics you're trying to hit?
Yeah, so I'm from Las Vegas, and so that's one reason that we're starting here. We will eventually expand outside of Las Vegas for sure, but this is just where we're getting started. Las Vegas is a great market for Roots to be in. In terms of high income renters, Las Vegas is the 9th fastest growing in the United States. So there are a lot of individuals here who are, again, high income earning households. They can own, they should own, but they're choosing to rent instead because it's a better fit for their lifestyle. And so being that the population that applies to is as large as it is here, it's a great city for us to be starting in.
It's really great to kind of go into how Roots is operating, but given the fact that we're speaking about housing, access, those different dynamics, I'd love to hear how you as a founder got to this specific idea. We like talking about the idea maze here. You woke up, you wanted to start a company. How did you get to this specific point?
I did not wake up and want to start a company and land on Roots. It was more so that it just happened. Roots was born through my own personal experiences. I have been renting since I was 13 years old. That is more than half of my life. I desire to participate in home ownership. I understand the wealth building power that home ownership offers. That being said, I'm not interested in committing to staying in one place for 5 to 10 years. And seeing that is also the case with everyone I know, all of my friends feel the same way. They are financially savvy. They want to own because they understand the benefits of home ownership, but they don't want to make that long-term commitment. And so just through my own personal experience and through seeing, my friends navigate similar situations, it became clear to me that there is a strong need for a way to own a home flexibly, especially now, especially post-COVID, when the ability to work remotely and live flexibly is so important to us. The way that we buy homes, it no longer aligns with the way that we live. And so I became painfully aware of that through my own lived experience. And that's how Roots was born.
When you speak to potential customers in the, let's say, like income and like achievement segments that you're talking with, a lot of us are obviously going to have mental models for thinking of home ownership. So I rent now, I buy a house next. What is it like to introduce them to the idea that actually there's this third option, fractional ownership? How does that tend to fit into people's kind of expectations on what their actual paths look like?
Flexible home ownership is easy for our customers to understand because it's really the sweet spot between the two options that they have today. Today, generally speaking, with the exception of Roots, when it comes to where you live, you have one of two options that are at extreme ends of the spectrum. On one end of the spectrum, you can buy the house the traditional way. You can make that long-term commitment. You can lock yourself into that, and you'll build wealth. Most of the time, on a long enough horizon, it'll be a great financial outcome for you. But it does come with that really long-term commitment. If for any reason that long-term commitment is not a fit for you, or for any other reason buying a home the traditional way is not a fit for you, your only other option as a consumer is to, as I like to say, light your money on fire every month when you pay rent. Those are your only two options. They're so extreme, right? They're all or nothing. Those are your only options today. And so Roots exists right in the middle of those two. We are the sweet spot right in between traditional home ownership and traditional renting. And so that's easy for our customers to understand because it's right in the middle of two things that they already understand.
I guess something I'm curious about is, this is such a fascinating space. It's also one that obviously your lived experience is going to resonate with, but I don't believe you'd spent an intense amount of time in the real estate sector before this. How do you just advise a founder who's interested in attacking a big problem like this to just kind of prepare, consider, and then actually take action?
I think just doing it is so important. Just going with it. If a founder who's in such a situation is anything like me, where they have real lived experiences that motivate them and drive them towards the goal that they have in building what they're building, lean into that thing that is inside of you that needs the product that you're building. And I don't know. I'm having a hard time answering this one.
No, that's actually a really good answer. So what you're saying is, and this is a good rubric that could fit any type of problem and type of issue, you just were drawn to this space. So your advice basically is, if you have that urge to focus on that, lean into it. So I guess when you were thinking of this, was it always through the lens of like founding a company? Maybe you could have like gotten into investing. Was it always just specifically in this lens?
Oh, it's always been through the lens of improving people's quality of living through a type of housing accessibility that aligns with the way they live. That has always been the focus. It turns out that that's a great business to be in, but the focus has always been and will always be on the customers and their experience. Something
I'd love to hear about here is the word roots, right? Like, roots is an interesting word. We kind of talked about this during the first episode we did together, where roots could basically mean anything beyond just like that foundational like starting point. How does the name Roots and your ambitions in like the real estate housing space, how does that apply to your like 10-year plan? Like, how big this market could be? Obviously housing is one of the biggest markets there are, but beyond that superficial level of interview analysis, I'd love to hear what you think about that.
So for most Americans that are homeowners, home equity is their single most valuable asset. And that's what we enable our customers to participate in. We enable them to participate in home equity, this really life-changing asset. It establishes their financial roots, right? It grounds them financially. So today, we enable customers to participate in that asset. In the future, we will open up all sorts of opportunities for our customers to take that asset and turn it into a financial tool that can be even more powerful to them than simply possessing that equity. That's kind of the future. We're enabling wealth building more than anything else, and it comes through our customer's single largest asset, which is home equity. It is their financial roots.
What's so interesting about the flexible aspect of this home ownership model is that if you're talking about how your home, your equity is the center of your wealth, if you could take flexible ownership of like different properties and you could shift and you could really go different directions, I think that's an interesting way of expanding how we could think about this. Something I'd love to hear, and I just want to know this at a founder level, because I think people are looking for actionable tips. Everything you're describing is just it's so big, right? Like, you're talking about different models, you're talking about houses, like accessibility, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. How do you reconcile that with the fact that you just need to do and focus on just like everyday, like deeply unsexy realities of like being a founder? Because I feel like this is a space especially where there'd be like an urge to just focus on that big picture. And this is where I would be distracted by. Like, how does that kind of play out in the way you run the company?
Well, I think you always need to have the big picture in your mind, right? That's essential. It's what you're building towards. But you can't just go after the big thing. You have to build towards it, right? You have to take these building blocks and stack them together to access that larger thing. So it's important to think about, what is the next thing that is going to move the company forward, and what is the next thing that is going to improve the customer experience? And that will eventually lead you to realizing the larger goals that you have. So you really do need to balance these two different things, the day-to-day, the next steps, with what is the vision that we're building towards? What is the future of this? So that you have the path aligned with what you're doing day to day, and making sure that ends up fitting into the larger picture and your goals of what the company will be. That's how I see it, at least.
Yeah, let's do a vibe check. How have members and potential members reacted to the shifting real estate market. If there's ever something over the past 3 years, it feels like things are swinging, things are great, things are bad, maybe things are going to be great again. How's that kind of manifested in building a space that requires, I think, a lot of your customers to be confident, to be somewhat adventurous? How do you think about that?
So a lot of that has to do with consumer behavior and the way that consumer behavior has shifted over recent years or recent decades even. There has been this cultural shift towards flexibility and towards freedom within homeownership, or within housing, really, more so than homeownership. And so polls show that nearly 90% of Gen Zs and millennials want to own a home. So yes, there is this American dream of homeownership that is alive and well. However, the data show that in practice, renting is increasingly popular. The reason for that is that for many, the reason that they are renting, it may be because it is what they can afford, right? If we look at the stats on high income earners who could own, but are renting instead, then we can glean meaningful insight into how the American youth approaches housing now. So to give you some data here, so between 2016 and 2021, the number of renting households that earn in excess of $150,000 a year, those are defined as high income earners, they have grown by 87% from 2016 to 2021. In that same duration of time, the general renting population has grown by 3%. So what we see is that there's this massive increase in the number of renters within the segment of the population that could be homeowners. So what that shows us is that more and more, even when individuals are financially capable of owning, they are instead electing to rent because it's a better fit for their lifestyle. And we very much see that at Roots. A lot of the individuals that come to us, again, they are high income earners, and they are individuals who on paper should own, but they're renting. Why is that? It's because they don't want to make that long-term commitment. We live in a world now where things happen later in life, right? Things happen later now than they used to. Back in the year 2000, well, actually, let me back this up a minute. When do you traditionally buy a home, right? What comes to mind? Marriage, getting to a point in life when you might be settling down. So back in year 2000, the average age that Americans got married was 26 years old. Now, the average age that Americans get married is 31. We're doing things later in life. And so what that means is that, while we're still working from the same age, we're just not settling down at the same age. And so that means that we reach a point in time where we are earning the amount of money that should enable us to become homeowners, but we're not ready to settle down. That's not what we want to do anymore. It was what people wanted to do 20 years ago, but generally that's not the consensus anymore. So we're settling down later, we're becoming homeowners later, and flexible homeownership, it solves that. It allows you to have the benefits of homeownership, but from at an earlier point in time.
I really like your focus on accessibility. There are going to be a lot of folks who would want housing to be as accessible as possible. If you're thinking of that word accessibility, what issues, bottlenecks have you or other people who are in your target market encountered that at the end of the day, Roots just isn't capable of addressing right now?
I think there are some factors that policy definitely influences here. Lately, I've been seeing a lot of ideas and actual implementations of policies that create artificial demand through incentivizing homeownership through, California just came out with this new program where they will subsidize your down payment up to 20% so that you can access homeownership without that massive down payment that homes in California often require. I think that is a terrible solution. In fact, I don't think it's a solution at all. It's a temporary Band-Aid on a gushing wound, and it creates a massive risk for consumers. And it's gas on the fire for home prices. The logic there with those kind of policies is, okay, home prices are too high, and So, home prices are too high. So let's drive more demand without concern for what impact that might have on prices when there's even less supply. We need to incentivize supply. Prices have everything to do with inventory. When supply is low, prices are high. It's really that simple. So measures that create artificial demand, they ensure that prices remain high as supply remains low. What we need to do is we need to incentivize supply. And also, it would be particularly irresponsible for any sort of policies that further, artificial demand to be implemented during a high rate environment, because so many would be at risk of default. Whole home ownership, it is a long-term commitment, right? That's how it is today. That's what Roots exists to solve. And so there's a lot of potential expenses beyond just the down payment that come with such a long-term commitment. And so making it too trivial to access, making it too trivial to enter into, that is a dangerous thing for consumers. I think that's something we need to be wary of when it comes to policy.
Would it ever make sense for Roots to build homes, or does the existing housing stock in a market like Las Vegas actually serve a lot of the needs you already have from your consumer base?
In the future, there will be built to own flexibly housing units. Absolutely. And it won't just be Roots. It will be Roots, but it will be others as well. Again, coming back to the concept of there only being these two extreme ends of the spectrum, that's also true for housing starts. And housing starts, you've got built for rent and you've got built to own, right? And inevitably, in the future, there will be built to own flexibly units because there is demand for that type of homeownership. Actually, in Q4 of 2022, for the first time ever, more built to rent units were started than built to own. That has never happened before. And I'll tell you, Marshall, that is really not a good thing for the personal economics of young people. We need to do something about that. The reason that more built to rent units were started than built to own is because there is demand for rental products. They wouldn't be building more built to rent than built to own if they didn't have demand, right? The demand is there. That's not to say that we don't also want to own. Again, it's just a better fit for our lifestyle a lot of the time to rent instead. So inevitably, there will absolutely be housing stock that is built to own flexibly.
What does built to rent mean? I have this image of just like slightly outdated countertops, everything's basically falling apart. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, help us get a picture of like what that actually means.
Yeah, there's a ton of built to rent units out there. I mean, there are a ton of built to rent units out there. The single largest REIT in the United States, Invitation Homes. Invitation Homes is in many cases built to rent. I think they also do other acquisitions, but they build a lot of homes that are built to rent. They're not necessarily old and outdated. Some of those homes are really nice. American Homes for Rent is another company that does that, but they are, homes that are built, that are new builds. The builders are incentivized to do that. They can command a premium compared to an existing home because most people are willing to pay a bit more to live in a brand new place, to be one of the first people to live there, or to just generally live in a new unit. It's nicer, better quality. The housing units themselves, they're not necessarily bad just because they're built for rent. They're fine houses most of the time. And they're purpose built for rental products.
That's so fascinating. So you're as a builder, you're thinking, a builder, not you being, but builders are thinking on that level. That's really interesting. So for this last section, I just love to actually shout out an individual. I really enjoyed your Roots website blog post about like your personal story, how it connects to the business. And I saw that you shouted out Julian Wieser at the bottom in terms of like working with you. So normally I have my sappy like, we'd love for you to talk about On Deck and your experience in On Deck, but let's just talk about, Julian for a second and say something nice. Julian's been on the podcast before. Julian, it's been amazing like working with him. I'd love for you just to talk about like your On Deck experience through the lens of like working with like an individual like him as you're building in this like building, right? Unironically building in this like really complicated, but I think really fascinating space.
Oh man, it is my absolute pleasure to spend a few minutes here talking about Julian and how great he is. Julian is incredible. I actually was just thinking yesterday, just in a moment where I had some space between my thoughts, between things, about how lucky I am to have crossed paths with him and to have his support on what we're building. He's incredible. I feel so fortunate. He's just there for me all the time. Whatever I need, he's there. I can send him a text at the strangest hour and he'll respond right away. Whatever I need guidance with, he's there. To have his unwavering support, it means so much. I actually could get pretty emotional talking about how much it means. So maybe we shouldn't spend too long on that. But no, I mean, it's just to have an individual or multiple individuals that have unwavering support for what you're building. They're there in the good times. They celebrate in the good times. They're there in the tough times. They offer guidance in the tough times. It is invaluable. And that's what Julian offers.
Yeah, and obviously I should have given a better intro. Julian, helped co-found On Deck and has obviously been building with founders such as yourself. The real question there, when you're talking about support and people having your back, you're basically talking about the existence of a community. When it comes to On Deck, obviously On Deck is, listeners are going to know this, but like we're going in person again in San Francisco. I'm actually just curious, like what's the founder space like in Las Vegas? Las Vegas was high on that list of cities that like once COVID came, people went remote. A lot of people were talking about Las Vegas. Like what's it like as an actual native who's also building in the founder space?
Las Vegas is a great place to be building a company, I'll tell you that. And it's not necessarily because there is this big founder community. It's more so because it's very peaceful. It's very easy to live. There aren't a ton of distractions. It's beautiful out. It's so beautiful most of the year. Actually, that's not true. I think I'm being a little bit delusional. It's not beautiful most of the year. It is pretty hot in the summer, I'll admit. This week in particular, it's absolutely beautiful. No, but it's a great place. There are definitely other companies that are based here that are awesome. I know there have been at least a few On Deck companies as well that have been based here. I have a bit of a founder community here in Las Vegas. I think generally my founder community is online, but Las Vegas is a great place to build. If you're thinking about living in Las Vegas as a listener to this and you're interested at all, please message me if you have any questions or want to just discuss what it's like building in Las Vegas a bit more. It's awesome and I cannot recommend it enough. It's a great place to be. And I think that not having some of the distractions that other cities can come with is really a benefit. I know there's a lot of talk about how like San Fran's the place to be because everybody's there and whatnot, but I think there's something to be said about a place where everybody isn't is maybe the place to be because you're able to focus and build what you're building without distraction.
There is just a question that has nothing to do with startups that I really just want to ask you. You fly, which is super cool. I'm genuinely just like curious because like from my perspective, like this is like what I do and like this is super easy and you're doing public speaking, you're interviewing, but you're also fly. Like it's kind of like the reverse for the two of us. Can you just talk about that? Nothing to do with the interview. Like that's the thing when I last interviewed, I'm like, wait, Lauren's like super interesting and we didn't talk about like the flying. Could you just talk about flying for a minute and then we'll close out?
I love flying so much. So my grandpa was a pilot. My dad was a pilot. We kind of keep it in the family, I guess you could say. It's, from the time I was a baby, my dad was packing me up in my car seat and putting me in the back seat of a Cessna and just taking me to fly over the Grand Canyon or something like that. So I've been doing it for a while and now it's my turn to get to experience that as well. No, it's great. I mean, I don't know if you can see this in the background over there or if it's cut off, but this is a drawing of the Wright. Is that viewable? Yeah,
you could see it. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah. So it's a drawing of the Wright brothers that my dad gave to me on the 10-year anniversary of the first flight in Kitty Hawk. Orville Wright, one of the Wright brothers, he wrote a letter to William Leonard Jones, kind of commemorating it and just kind of celebrating, it's been 10 years since we made that first flight. And my dad had that letter and he gave it to me along with that drawing, which is pretty cool. So yeah, my family's always just been really interested in flying and I'm interested in it as well. It's so fun. When I was a kid, we had this, when you're a kid, you see a sign and you'll read it over and over again, but not necessarily truly understand the meaning of it. This happens a lot in a classroom when you're a kid, right? You'll see a poster on the wall and you'll read it over and over and over again. But what does it really mean? You're not sure, but you know what it says. When I was a kid growing up, we had a poster that my dad put up in the garage that said, "Flying is the second greatest thrill known to man. Landing is the first." And I read that probably hundreds of times, never really understood what it meant until the first time I landed a plane. And as soon as I landed a plane, I thought, flying is the second greatest thrill known to man. Landing is definitely the first. It's such a thrill. But when you're flying, it's peaceful. Everything below you is just, sure, you've got to, control the aircraft and whatnot, and you've got to, stay on top of all of that. But in the moments where you can kind of just zoom out and go, wow, I'm up here and everything else is down below, and it's so peaceful up here. Everything down there is so small, and the sky just looks so nice from that view. It's great. I love flying.
Okay, so now I have to ask you another follow-up based off of this. Your tone vibe just shifted so hard when we started talking about flying that the actual immediate question that I have to ask then, would you advise that founders just find something that has nothing tangentially to do with their company that they can obviously be passionate about? Because that's what I'm kind of getting from you here.
That's something I would advise everyone do, whether you're starting a company or not. Your work is going to be the culmination of experiences that you have prior to and outside of those things that you do, because you carry those experiences with you and they apply to everything else you do. So I think if you're able to assign passion and meaning to something that is either tangential or unrelated entirely to the thing that you're doing, then you're going to be able to extrapolate some of that passion and apply it to the thing that you're doing, right? It's almost like the threshold for your ability to be excited or passionate expands. It's like exercising a muscle, right? If you can be really passionate about this one thing and just grow your ability to experience passion and excitement, then when you go experience something else that has work or starting a company or otherwise, you now have this larger capacity for experiencing excitement and passion, and you can apply that to what you're doing. And I think overall, it just kind of helps drive you forward. It's really important to be passionate about things. I think it's really important to find things that you have strong convictions in and allocate some of your time to focusing on those things. I think it's good for you and ultimately will be better for work.
What did you want to be when you were growing up? Just because, once again, I'm kind of compressing this interview and the last interview and us talking off camera. You worked in fashion before this. You obviously love flying. You're in this real estate access space. I'm just trying to find if there's a comprehensive thing that kind of led you here, just given all these seemingly disparate interests.
Yeah, I didn't really have a vision of what I wanted to be when I grew up as a kid. I still don't. I want to be doing what I'm doing right now, and I want to do that forever. But defining what I want to be, it's just I want to be what I am, I guess, and whatever that might apply to, I'm interested. I was always, from a very young age, I was interested in business. Quite young, actually. I started my first business in third grade or something like that, and that led to my next business, which led to my next business. And I think by the time I was 13, I probably had 4 or 5 different ventures that I had tried. Some I ran with, others I left behind. But I was always really interested in that. I'm really interested in anything that allows me to take multiple moving parts and find the way to align them in such a way that it allows everything to kind of create a flywheel that makes the whole entire thing run better and faster. That's always been an interest of mine.
That's a great place to leave it. I think it's really cool with this format, especially to our friends at Studio Box. This definitely feels a lot more intimate from a conversation perspective than my horribly angled Zoom or Riverside conversation. So I'm glad that I could ask you those last questions. Lauren, this has been really interesting. I always enjoy speaking with you. Any closing suggestions for where folks should go to learn more about your company? All those good things, obviously.
Yeah, so you can go to www.roots.homes. If you're in Las Vegas, that's where we're operating today. You can apply for homes there. You can join the wait list. If you're not in Las Vegas and you like the idea of Roots and you want Roots to be in your city, there is a form on our site that you can fill out to request a next city. If you're interested at all, do that. When we start exploring what next markets may be, we will absolutely consider where interested customers are and add those to the list of locations to explore.
Thanks again for joining us on The Deep End.
Thank you, Marshall.